Startled, Illyra turned toward a rocky slope beyond the monitoring towers. Leorans rarely used spoken language, and only for ritual or teaching. Hearing a voice here made no sense. She followed the sound, carefully climbing down a narrow path. Her leg trembled, and she had to grip the rock with her hands. When she reached the bottom, she saw something that made her breath catch. A being lay beside a damaged metal pod, half buried in the ground. Smoke drifted slowly from its side. The being was smaller than a Leoran, with rough skin and uneven features. Its clothing was torn and one arm was pressed tightly against its body. The being looked up and met her eyes. Illyra froze. The eyes were filled with fear, pain, and something else she could not name. The being opened its mouth again, and sounds came out, strange, broken, but filled with meaning even if she could not understand the words. Irela should have left. Humans were known to exist, though rarely seen. They were listed in Leoran records as emotionally unstable and biologically inefficient. Contact was discouraged. But Irela did not feel fear. She felt recognition. Slowly, she stepped closer. The human's breathing was uneven. His eyes followed her movements, alert but not aggressive. When she knelt beside him, he flinched slightly, then relaxed when she did not touch him. "I won't hurt you," she said softly, using spoken words instead of thought. Her voice shook, unused to sound. The human did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. His shoulders lowered a little. Illyra examined the pod. It was damaged badly, beyond simple repair. Whatever journey the human had been on, it had ended here. She looked back at him and made a decision she had never made before. She chose. With careful effort, she activated her communicator and sent a weak signal for assistance, masking the human's presence as damaged equipment. Then she returned her attention to him. She offered him water from her pack. He hesitated, then accepted it with both hands, drinking slowly. When he finished, he looked at her and smiled faintly. The smile stunned her. Leorans did not smile like that. It was uneven, imperfect, and full of warmth. It made something tighten in her chest. "My name is Evan," he said, pointing to himself. Illyra pointed to herself. Illyra. He repeated her name carefully, as if it mattered to him to say it right. Over the next hours, they communicated with gestures, simple sounds, and shared patience. Evan showed her the damaged parts of his pod. Illyra brought him food and helped stabilize the small shelter the pod could provide. She moved slowly, apologizing without words for every delay. Evan never rushed her. When her leg failed and she stumbled, he reached out instinctively, then stopped himself, waiting for her nod before helping. That single act, waiting, felt more powerful to her than any telepathic comfort her people had ever given. As the sky darkened, rescue drones approached. Illyra hid Evan inside the pod and stood outside, heart racing. The drones scanned the area, collected data, and left, satisfied with the false report. When the quiet returned, Evan looked at her with clear gratitude. "Thank you," he said. She did not know the word, but she knew the feeling. They sat together in silence as stars appeared overhead. Evan spoke softly, telling her about his world, though she understood only pieces. He came from far away. He was an engineer. He liked fixing things. He had volunteered for exploration, knowing the risks. "You're not broken," he said suddenly, pointing gently at her leg, then at her chest. Illyra stared at him, confused. He struggled for words, then placed a hand over his heart. "You're enough." The words struck her harder than any collective thought ever had. No one had said that to her before. When it was time for Evan to sleep, Illyra remained awake, watching the stars and listening to the quiet hum of the city far away. For the first time in her life, the silence in her mind did not feel empty. It felt full. She knew this meeting would change everything. She did not yet know how or what it would cost. But she knew one truth with absolute clarity. She would not let the human be taken away without a choice. And for the first time, she believed she deserved one too. Irira returned to the hidden place every day. She told her parents she was helping with outer monitoring tasks, which was not completely untrue. She did check the systems, adjust sensors, and file reports. But her real reason was Evan. Evan waited inside the damaged pod, which Illyra had slowly turned into a safe shelter. She brought him food suited to humans, learning carefully what made him uncomfortable and what helped him feel stronger. He taught her small human words, repeating them slowly, never laughing when she made mistakes. Their conversations were simple, made of gestures, drawings in the dust, and broken sentences, but meaning flowed easily between them. Evan noticed things others never had. When Irina needed to rest, he did not show impatience. When her thoughts grew tangled and she struggled to explain herself aloud, he waited, giving her time to find the words. He never once tried to touch her without permission. In his presence, her body felt less like a problem and more like a truth she could live with. One day, Evan watched the distant floating city and asked, "Do you live there?" "Yes," Illyra replied. He smiled. "Beautiful." She hesitated, then said softly, "Not for me." Evan looked at her carefully. Why? She struggled to explain. On Leora, weakness was not hated, but it was ignored. Those who could not fully join the collective were protected, but quietly removed from importance. Illyra could feel emotions, but only faintly. She could think alone, but that was considered empty, not valuable. "I am slow," she said. "Quiet. Different." Evan shook his head gently. "You are thoughtful." That word stayed with her. As days passed, Illyria realized something strange. When she was with Evan, her weak telepathy felt even weaker. But she did not miss it. She began to enjoy using words, choosing them carefully. Speaking made her feel present in a way the collective never had. Evan told her about Earth. His world was noisy, crowded, and full of disagreement. Humans argued often, failed often, and changed direction constantly. To Illyra, it sounded chaotic. "But you still try," she said. "Always," Evan replied. "Trying is kind of our thing." One evening, while adjusting a power cell, Evan asked, "Do you get to choose your life here?" Illyra froze. Leorans did not think in those terms. Roles were assigned based on ability. Harmony was achieved by fitting where one belonged. "I exist," she said carefully. Evan frowned, not in anger, but in concern. "That's not the same." That night, Illyra returned home with a heavy feeling in her chest. Her parents sensed her unrest through the faint link they still shared. Her mother invited her to sit beside the glowing pool in their living space. "You are troubled," her mother said gently. "I am thinking," Illyra replied. Her father paused. "Thinking alone?"
Yes, that worried them.
Independent thought was rare and often uncomfortable for Leorans. Too much separation from the collective could lead to emotional instability, or so the belief went. "You should rest more," her mother suggested. "The collective can soothe you." Illyra nodded, but inside, she knew she would not do that. The next day, Evan told her something that changed everything. "My people will look for me," he said. "Eventually." Illyra's heart tightened. "They will take you away?" "Yes, that's the plan." The idea of the pod being repaired, of Evan leaving, filled her with a quiet panic she had never felt before. "I don't want that," she said. Evan looked surprised. "I have to go home," she swallowed. "I want you to choose." He was silent for a long time. "No one has ever said that to me like this," he admitted. In the days that followed, Illyra noticed changes in herself. She began to question systems she had once accepted. Why was silence considered emptiness? Why was perfection more important than understanding? Her weak connection to the collective, once seen as a flaw, now felt like space to think, to imagine, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. One afternoon, Evan tried to stand without support and failed, falling back with a frustrated sound. Illyra moved to help, slower than she wished. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "For what?" Evan asked. "For being slow." He looked at her seriously. "You arrive exactly when you mean to." The words settled into her like warmth. Later, Leoran researchers arrived near the area, scanning for unusual signals. Illyra felt their thoughts brush against her mind like distant wind. Evan noticed her discomfort. "They're close?" "Yes." "Am I in danger?" "No," she said quickly. "Not harmed. Studied." Evan smiled slightly. Figures. Illyra made a decision. That evening, she brought Evan to her home. It was risky, very risky. But hiding forever was not a choice. It was fear. Her parents were shocked when they saw him. A human standing awkwardly in their quiet, glowing space, looking around with open curiosity. "He is stranded," Illyra said before they could speak. "He is kind." "He is patient. He sees me." Her parents studied Evan through thought and sight. They sensed no threat, only intense emotion and focused awareness. "He cannot join the collective," her father said. "He does not need to," Illyra replied. "He listens." Evan bowed his head slightly, unsure of protocol. Days passed with tense discussions. Scientists observed Evan. They tested his adaptability, his emotional regulation, his learning speed. He surprised them. He learned basic Leoran systems faster than expected. He adjusted his sleep cycle. He accepted limitations without complaint. He asked thoughtful questions. More troubling to the council was Illyra. She spoke clearly. She challenged gently. She asked why difference was treated as deficiency. She explained how Evan treated her not as broken, but as complete. Her parents watched their daughter change, not into something unstable, but into something strong. Finally, one evening, Illyra stood before them and said the words she had practiced for days. "I wish to bond with him, by choice. I wish to marry him." Silence filled the room. This was not forbidden by law. It was simply unthinkable. Her mother felt something unfamiliar rise within her. A sharp emotion, separate from the collective, fear and hope. The council requested time to decide. Illyra waited, knowing one thing for certain. She was no longer asking to exist. She was choosing how. The council chamber was quiet in a way that made thoughts feel heavy. The room was wide and circular, filled with soft light that changed color with emotion. Elder Leorans sat along the curved walls, their bodies calm, their minds connected in a deep, shared awareness. To them, silence was not empty. It was full of agreement. Illyra stood alone at the center. She could feel the edge of the collective brushing against her mind, distant and unclear, like voices behind thick glass. She knew they were all aware of her presence, of her request, of the human waiting in her family home. Her father stood a short distance behind her, his posture steady. Her mother sat among the elders, her thoughts restless in a way that unsettled her. The lead elder spoke, not with sound, but with thought that gently pressed against Illyra's mind. "You ask for a bond outside our kind," the elder said. "Explain why." Illyra took a slow breath. Speaking aloud still felt strange, but she chose words instead of thought. On purpose, words belonged to her. "He treats me as equal," she said. "Not as incomplete, not as something to manage. An elder shifted slightly. Equality is already provided through care. Care is not the same as respect, Illyra replied. Her voice was calm, but her heart beat fast. He listens to me. He waits.
He allows me to choose.
The word choose rippled through the chamber. Some elders felt curiosity. Others felt discomfort. One of the scientists stepped forward. The human has been observed, they said. He adapts quickly, faster than expected, but he lacks telepathy, emotional regulation through the collective, and biological longevity. He lacks many things. She paused, then added, So do I. The chamber grew still. The lead elder turned their attention fully to her.
You compare yourself to him?
I do, Illyra said. We are both considered inefficient, and yet, together, we function well. Her parents felt the truth of that statement, even if they did not fully understand it. While the council debated, Evan waited. He sat in the quiet room of Illyra's home, hands resting on his knees, breathing slow and controlled. He knew he was being discussed, measured, possibly decided upon, without his voice present. This made him uneasy, but he did not resent it. He understood systems. He understood fear of change. Illyra's mother entered the room and sat across from him. You are patient, she said aloud, testing the sound of her voice. I try to be, Evan replied honestly. Why? She asked. Why wait? Why adapt so fully to a world not your own? Evan thought for a moment. Because I care about her, and because learning doesn't feel like loss to me. It feels like growth. The word growth lingered. She studied him carefully. If you leave, you will return to your people. Yes. If you stay, you may never. Yes. There was no regret in his voice, only acceptance. She felt something shift inside her, a subtle separation from the collective thought. It scared her. Back in the chamber, the debate continued. Some elders worried about precedent, others about cultural dilution. A few questioned whether Illyra's independent thinking was itself a danger. She questions harmony, one elder noted. She questions stagnation, another replied quietly. Illyra listened without interruption. When the room finally turned to her again, she spoke.
You fear that my bond will weaken our society? She said.
But I believe our society is already weak where it refuses to change. That thought struck hard. Liarans had not faced serious challenge in generations. Their perfection had become stillness. Their unity had become silence. I was born with less connection, Illyra continued. Because of that, I learned to think alone, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. You taught me that was a flaw. But it allowed me to see what we lost. Her father stepped forward.
Our daughter was always quiet, he said. We thought it was absence.
We were wrong. It was space. The council felt uncertainty ripple through the collective. That night, Evan was asked to speak before the elders. He stood in the chamber, small and solid, his presence strange but not threatening. He spoke aloud, knowing most would translate his words through technology rather than thought. I don't want to take anything from you, he said. I don't want to change you by force. I just want to build a life with someone who chose me the way I chose her. An elder asked, What do you offer her? Evan did not answer quickly. I offer effort, he said finally. I offer patience. I offer choice. And I offer failure. Because when I fail, I learn. And when I learn, I improve. The elders had no direct concept for that cycle. Improvement was expected, not earned. Days passed. Illyra and Evan spent their time together quietly. They walked slowly through the outer gardens. Evan matched her pace without comment. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they did not. Illyra noticed that her parents began to visit more often. They asked questions. They listened. Her mother once asked, "Are you afraid?" Illyra nodded. Yes. Then why continue? Because fear is not a reason to stop choosing. That answer stayed with her mother long after the conversation ended. The council called a final session. They did not give an answer immediately. Instead, they presented a test, not of Evan, but of Illyra. She was asked to propose a role for herself and Evan within Leoran society, not as an exception, but as a function. But Illyra spent the night thinking. In the morning, she returned with clarity. "We can act as translators," she said, "between collective and individual, between silence and speech, between humans and Leorans. Not because we are perfect, but because we are different." The idea was risky. It was also brilliant. The council felt it. A new pathway forming where none had existed before. When the final decision came, it was not unanimous, but it was enough. The bond was approved, not quietly, not hidden, approved openly. Illyra felt the weight lift from her chest. Evan exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath for weeks. Her parents stood beside her, uncertain but supportive. That night, as stars reflected off the floating city, Illyra and Evan stood together at the edge of the platform. "I don't know what happens next," Evan said. "I do," Illyra replied softly. "We choose again and again." For the first time, the collective did not feel like a wall. It felt like a beginning. The approval did not bring peace right away. Instead, it brought attention. Illyra and Evan became a point of focus across Leora. Not a spectacle, but a question. People did not stare openly, yet their thoughts brushed closer now, curious and uncertain. The collective shifted more often around Illyra, no longer distant, but no longer smooth either. Change was uncomfortable. Evan noticed it first. He felt it in the pauses during conversations, in the way officials spoke carefully around him, in the way systems that once felt welcoming now seemed cautious. "Are they regretting it?" he asked one evening as they sat in the outer gardens. Illyra considered the question. "They are thinking," she said. That alone is new. The council assigned them their proposed role quickly, perhaps hoping structure would stabilize the disruption. Illyra and Evan were asked to assist in early communication planning with humans, should future contact increase. Evan would help translate human needs and behavior. Illyra would help interpret Leoran systems in ways individuals could understand. Working together felt natural. Evan approached problems step by step. When a process confused him, he asked questions without shame. When he made mistakes, he corrected them openly. Leoran researchers found this strange but oddly effective. Errors were no longer hidden, they were discussed. Illyra, meanwhile, spoke more than she ever had before. She explained concepts using stories instead of data streams. She noticed that younger Leorans listened more closely to her than to traditional instruction. Her weakness made her relatable. That frightened some elders. One afternoon, during a review session, an elder spoke directly to her. "You encourage separation from the collective," the elder said. "I encourage understanding," Illyra replied calmly. "The collective is stronger when individuals know why they belong." That idea unsettled many. Outside the official work life continued in smaller, more meaningful ways. Evan learned to navigate Leoran spaces carefully, always aware of height differences, gravity shifts, and social signals he could not sense. Illyra guided him patiently, never assuming ignorance meant lack of intelligence. In return, Evan helped her physically when needed, but only when asked. He adjusted their living space so she did not need to strain herself. He never framed it as fixing her. He framed it as teamwork. One evening, Illyra struggled after a long day. Her leg ached, and her thoughts felt tangled from too much mental contact. I feel scattered, she admitted. Evan sat beside her. Do you want quiet, or do you want company? She blinked. No one had ever asked that before. Company, she said. So he stayed, not speaking, just present. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Elsewhere, resistance grew. Some Leorans worried humans would bring unpredictability. Others feared that valuing weakness would weaken society itself. Quiet meetings formed, not in opposition, but in concern. Illyra's parents felt the pressure deeply. Her father was approached by colleagues who asked if he regretted supporting her. I regret not listening sooner, he replied. Her mother struggled more. The collective no longer felt as comforting as it once had. Individual emotions, fear, pride, uncertainty, pressed louder. One night she asked Illyra, if this path causes harm, would you stop? I would adjust, but I would not return to silence. That answer was painful. It was also brave. The true test came sooner than expected. A human signal was detected near Leoran space, a research vessel, peaceful, requesting limited contact. The council froze. For generations, avoidance had been easy. Now, avoidance felt like cowardice. They turned to Illyra and Evan.
You proposed this bridge, the lead elder said.
Now you must help us cross it. Preparations began immediately. Evan worked tirelessly, helping Leoran systems adapt to human communication styles. He explained tone, context, emotional expression. He warned them not to overanalyze every pause.
They'll think you're angry, he said gently. You're just quiet.
Illyra prepared herself differently. She knew standing between two worlds would be difficult. She would not fully belong to either. But she also knew she could not step back. When the communication window opened, Illyra felt her heart race. The human voices were familiar to Evan. The Lorian responses were careful and precise. At first it was awkward, then it was better. Evan translated emotion. Illyra translated intention. Together they turned confusion into clarity. After the session ended, the council chamber was silent, not with agreement, with awe. This worked, someone whispered through the collective. Yes, another replied, because they are imperfect. The words would have been unthinkable before. That night, Illyra and Evan stood together beneath the stars again. You did amazing, Evan said. So did you, she replied. He smiled. You know, back home, people would call this history. Illyra tilted her head.
A beginning?
Exactly.
She reached for his hand.
Slowly, deliberately. He waited. When her fingers closed around his, the contact sent no telepathic signal. No collective echo. Just warmth. Across the city, thoughts shifted. Not all resistance faded, not all fear disappeared, but something irreversible had begun. The idea that strength could be quiet. That progress could be chosen, and that a society built on perfection might finally learn how to grow. Part 5 will bring the resolution. Long-term consequences, cultural change, and the quiet but powerful future Illyra and Evan create together. The change did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, like light at the edge of dawn. After the first successful communication with the human vessel, Leora did not celebrate. Leorans were not a people of celebration. Instead, they observed. They reviewed data, emotional patterns, and social responses. They watched how individuals reacted when the collective shifted even slightly. And it did shift. Young Leorans began asking more questions. Not loudly, not rebelliously, but sincerely. They asked why humans relied on spoken language. They asked why Evan smiled so often. They asked why Illyra was allowed to speak alone in council sessions. For the first time in many cycles, curiosity spread faster than certainty. Illyra and Evan moved into a shared living space near the outer gardens. It was modest, designed for comfort rather than efficiency. Evan helped adapt the space so Illyra could move easily without strain. Low platforms, gentle paths, support rails that blended into the design instead of standing out. No one called them accommodations. They were simply choices. Their bond ceremony was quiet. There was no grand display, no dramatic declaration, only close family, a few council members and representatives from the research division. Evan stood beside Illyra, nervous but calm. Illyra stood steady, her posture imperfect but proud. The bond was recognized not through shared thought, but through spoken promise. Evan spoke first. His voice was clear.
"I choose to stay," he said. "Not because I am trapped."
"Not because I owe anything, but because this life matters to me. And she matters to me." Illyra spoke next. "I choose to walk beside him," she said, "at my pace, with my limits, with my voice." The collective listened. For the first time, it did not try to absorb the moment. It allowed it to exist. After the ceremony, life did not become easy. Some Liorans avoided them. Others watched from a distance. A few approached Evan directly, asking careful questions about Earth, about human family structures, about how humans handled loss and disagreement. Evan answered honestly. He did not pretend humans were superior. He spoke of mistakes, of failures, of slow progress.
"We're not strong because we're perfect," he said often.
"We're strong because we keep going." That idea began to take root. Illyra noticed changes in herself too. She was still disabled, her legs still tired easily. Her telepathic sense was still faint, but she no longer saw these things as barriers she had to apologize for. When she rested openly. When she spoke slowly, she did not rush herself. And when she needed help, she asked without shame. Others noticed. A young Leoran with sensory overload began requesting time alone, inspired by Illyra's independence. Another, with difficulty synchronizing to the collective, began learning spoken language. Difference was no longer hidden. It was explored. The council eventually expanded Illyra and Evan's role. They became permanent cultural liaisons. Not just between humans and Leorans, but between the collective and the individual. It was difficult work. Some days, Evan felt the weight of representing an entire species. Some days, Illyra felt exhausted by the constant pull between connection and separation. On those days, they returned to the gardens. They walked slowly. Evan matched her pace without thinking doubt. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat quietly, watching light shift across the floating city. One evening, Illyra asked, "Do you regret staying?" Evan answered without hesitation. "No, even when it's hard, especially then," he said. "Hard things mean you're building something real." That night, a message arrived from Earth. It was not a demand. It was not an order. It was an invitation. Human leadership acknowledged Evan's decision. They requested formal diplomatic exchange, shared research, cultural dialogue. The council met for a long time. In the end, they agreed. The first human delegation arrived months later. Not as explorers, but as guests. They were surprised by the calm of Leora, by the quiet thoughtfulness of its people. They were even more surprised by Illyra. She greeted them openly, speaking aloud, walking with care, unashamed of her pace. Evan stood beside her, not as a guide, but as a partner. Together they translated more than words. They translated values. Over time, Leora changed, not into a human world, not into chaos, but into something flexible. The collective remained, but it loosened its grip. Individuals were allowed more space. Choice became part of harmony rather than a threat to it. And Irira? She was no longer known as the disabled one. She was known as the one who asked. Years later, as new structures rose and new paths formed through the city, a Leoran child asked their teacher why humans were allowed to live on Leora. The teacher answered, "Because they taught us something we forgot." "What was that?" the child asked. "That perfection is not the same as wholeness." In the outer gardens, Illyria rested beside Evan, her head against his shoulder. The stars above were brighter than they used to be, or perhaps she simply noticed them more now.
"I used to think silence meant nothing," she said quietly.
Evan smiled. "And now I know it means space," she replied. "Space to choose." He squeezed her hand gently. Together they watched the future unfold. Not loudly, not perfectly, but deliberately. And for the first time in Leoran history, that was enough. On the planet Leora, everything was designed to be smooth, bright, and perfect. The cities floated gently above the ground on quiet energy fields. Buildings curved like flowing water, without sharp corners or rough edges. The people of Leora believed perfection created peace, and peace created progress. Illyria did not fit that design. She moved slowly through the lower gardens, her steps careful and uneven. One of her legs was weaker than the other, and her balance often failed her if she hurried. Her species, the Leorans, were known for graceful motion and shared thought. They communicated through a natural mental link, feeling each other's emotions and intentions without words. But Illyria's mind was mostly silent. She could sense others only faintly, like distant echoes through fog. Because of this, she was called incomplete. Not cruelly. Leorans did not believe in cruelty, but with quiet acceptance, as one accepted a broken instrument that could no longer play its role in the orchestra. Illyria lived with her parents near the edge of the city, where fewer people passed and fewer thoughts pressed against her mind. Her parents loved her in the way their people knew how, providing care and safety. But they did not understand her inner loneliness. They could not feel it. That morning, Illyria had slipped away from the city paths and followed an old research route toward the outer lands. The air grew thinner there, cooler, filled with the hum of distant machines monitoring space traffic. She liked this place because the collective voice of her people faded almost completely. Here, her thoughts felt like her own. As she walked, a strange signal touched her weak telepathic sense. It was not Leoran. It was sharp, uneven, and unfamiliar. She stopped, heart beating faster, and focused as best she could. The signal was not a thought. It was a sound. A voice.